Hello, space friends. Captain Snuggles here, bringing you another episode of X4 Oversimplified. This game is insanely complicated. Any video less than 3 hours long is probably oversimplified, so I could slap that label on anything, but I really am going to try to boil things down to the bare minimum, and then boil them down some more. This series is mainly meant for new players, not as a comprehensive guide, but just as a solid foundation to lay the groundwork for future learning. We have almost reached the actual gameplay guides, but first there is one more piece of background knowledge that I want to cover. Continuing my streak of hot button topics, today I'll be talking about the way the game is balanced and how you can adjust the difficulty of your open universe campaigns. Like last time, I'm not here to give my opinions about how the game should be balanced. I'm here to talk about how it is balanced, for better or for worse. But before we talk about any of that, we need context. The context for balance and difficulty is winning and losing, or specifically the criteria for victory and defeat in an open universe campaign. X4 is a sandbox game. You can technically lose if you die before the first autosave, but other than that, there are no built-in criteria for victory or defeat. You choose those criteria yourself. That said, even though everyone's idea of winning is different, anyone can reach a point where they can no longer suffer significant setbacks. For our purposes, we'll consider that winning. Unsurprisingly, reaching that point is a matter of economics. Once you can produce ships continuously and securely, you're unstoppable. Continuous production equates to something like 64 small ships, 32 medium, or 3 large per hour. Even if only half of those are combat ships, and even if you just blindly throw your navy at the nearest target every few hours, that'll be enough to keep any enemy at bay indefinitely. If you use any type of strategy, that level of production will eventually conquer the universe. To reach that level of production, you have a couple of options. The first option is to buy from NPCs. To do that, you need some upfront investment in military and logistics to protect, support, and supplement the NPC faction's economy to keep their war for shipyard fully stocked, and then you need to make enough steady income to constantly buy ships. The second option is to build your own shipyards. You can create fully self-sufficient production chains that have very high setup costs but very low operating costs. Of course, you can mix and match as well, producing some or all of your own ships while getting some or all of the raw materials from NPCs, which will result in variable levels of setup costs and operating costs. As a broad generalization, setup costs will be in the hundreds of millions, and operating costs will be in the tens of millions per hour. Regardless of which option you go with and the exact costs involved, the point is that once you've hit a certain economic threshold, you're untouchable. So, that's victory. Now we can talk about difficulty and balance in pursuit of that victory. A lot of single-player games have difficulty settings that you can adjust before you start a new campaign. In addition to those difficulty settings, many games are balanced so that multiple playstyles or playable races, etc., are all more or less equally capable of achieving victory. In other words, in a lot of single-player games, balance and difficulty are two discrete things. That is not the case in X4. Egosoft has always had a lore before balance philosophy, meaning they are fine with the game being ludicrously unbalanced, if that imbalance is consistent with the lore. Now, to be fair, X4 is more balanced than previous X games, at least when it comes to ship design. For each major ship task like trading, mining, anti-fighter combat, anti-capital combat, etc., Egosoft has tried to make sure that every faction has at least one ship that can perform each task semi-competently. Still, X4 is very imbalanced compared to other modern games, and moreover, it has exactly 0 discrete, adjustable difficulty options. It does have one difficulty setting, but that setting is hidden. It's selected randomly at the start of each run. You don't find out what it's set to until you're at least 10 hours into the run, and there's no way to adjust it without mods. That setting is Xenon Aggression, and out of all the game design choices of all time, it is certainly one of them. But back to the things we can actually control. X4 is deliberately imbalanced, and you can use that imbalance to adjust your game's difficulty in a roundabout way by deliberately utilizing gameplay options that are overpowered or underpowered. Those options include everything from your starting scenario to your ship choice to which factions you work with, and there's rarely any explicit indication of how your choices will affect your game's difficulty. So, let's go over some of the highlights. Please be aware that I won't be giving step-by-step instructions on how to implement any of these techniques, because then this video wouldn't be oversimplified. But I guarantee that someone in the comments section can fill you in if you ask. Let's start with things that decrease difficulty. These methods either decrease the economic victory threshold or help you reach that threshold faster. First off, we have the guided starting scenarios. Starting scenarios with this label include plot lines that shower you with free stuff, support your initial empire setup, and provide some expanded tutorials. Experienced players can usually make money faster through other methods, but these are great little jump starts for newer players. Next up, we're jumping right into the deep end with the Terran economy. The Terrans have a greatly simplified supply chain, which greatly reduces the initial investment required to get your stations up and running. Once your stations are up, they make a ludicrous amount of money. And Sol is so peaceful that you barely have to invest in security, further reducing your initial startup costs. It's like if the tutorial area in an RPG dropped better loot than the endgame dungeons. There's 0 incentive to ever leave, and many players don't. If you want to dramatically shorten the path to becoming an unstoppable god, all you have to do is set up shop in Asteroid Belt. Next, we have a trio of extremely powerful military assets. There is plenty of OP combat equipment in the game, but these 3 stand out from the pack because the AI is fundamentally incapable of dealing with them. The AI can't hit laser towers in high attention due to the tiny hitbox, and in low attention, they can't effectively apply damage against large numbers of towers. The AI can't fight back effectively against torpedo bombers due to their range and their movement patterns. And the AI can't beat battleships, specifically the Asgard in low attention and the Earl King in high attention, because the NPC faction's fleets are simply too small to beat them in a damage race. There are a handful of exceptions to all of those things, but otherwise, when used correctly, these assets all provide the player with military strength that the AI just can't overcome, which dramatically reduces the required investment in other military assets. In a similar vein, we have player-piloted ships. All your enemies are limited by the game's AI. You can bypass that limitation to gain a huge advantage, even if you're not the world's greatest pilot. That's true in both combat and non-combat scenarios. Obviously, everyone is going to fly some ship at some point. That's why we're here. But having the player as a pilot does give your faction a huge advantage that NPC factions just can't match, especially if you're flying the biggest and baddest ships in the fleet. Moving on, we come to a broad category that I'm calling the free ship strats. Free ships equal free money, and free money makes everything easier. There are quite a few well-documented methods of circumventing the usual ship acquisition systems and getting them for minimal investment of time or credits. Some of those methods are very cheesy, some are much less so, and you just have to judge each one based on your personal cheese tolerance. Speaking of cheese, next on my list is save scumming, which is a colloquial term for repeatedly reloading saves to manipulate the outcome of important events. This is a popular tactic in every game that allows it. I've done it, you've done it, everyone's done it. Everyone knows it's a cheap crutch, and everyone does it anyway. Here's another one that everyone does. Making no enemies. It is easy to be allies with all the factions, opening up more trade routes and providing more security. This reduces the required defense investment and increases the rate at which you make money, accelerating your rise to unstoppable god status, at which point you can choose your enemies and massacre them with impunity. And last but absolutely not least is modding your game. This one is self-explanatory. There are a lot of mods for X4, and some of them decrease the difficulty. Now, let's move on to the other side of the equation, things that increase difficulty. These methods either increase the economic victory threshold or increase the time required to reach that threshold. First up, we have the sandbox starting scenarios. These start types don't offer you any upfront assistance, although this is a pretty minor inconvenience once you have some experience under your belt. Next, we have a broad category that I'm calling themed runs. There are about 1 million self-imposed limitations you could choose to give your run more of a thematic flair, using exclusively piracy, exclusively trade, playing pacifist, etc., etc. The fewer gameplay options you allow yourself, the harder the game becomes. Within that category, I want to specifically highlight single faction runs. This is probably the most common type of themed run. All factions are playable, but they all have some type of limitation in terms of their ships, their territory, and/or their economy, which will generally slow down your income to some extent. A great way to make the game way more difficult is by making many enemies. This will never happen organically during a run, but you can choose to deliberately piss off a lot of factions, which will shut down trade routes, reduce your income, and force you to invest more in security to safeguard your remaining income streams. And again, last but not least, is modding your game. This one's still self-explanatory. You can see the decreased difficulty list is way longer than the increased difficulty list. I'm sure people are already suggesting additions to both lists in the comments, but I don't think the relative length of the lists will change. There are a lot of imbalanced in-game mechanics that you can exploit to trivialize certain portions of the game, whereas there are relatively few in-game mechanics that you can use to make your playthrough harder. If you want a higher difficulty, you have to place restrictions on yourself and enforce those restrictions yourself. I feel like it's worth reiterating that this is a single-player game. You can do what you want. Go nuts. Hang out in Asteroid Belt, print unlimited money with zero risk, and use flyby boarding on every Asgard that enters the system. Or go the opposite direction and do a nightmare difficulty split-only permadeath pacifist run with lore-accurate enemy factions. It's your universe. It can be as hard or as easy as you want, and hopefully this video has given you some idea of how to make it that way. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you'll tune in next time, and until then, this is Captain Snuggles, signing off.